It was supposed to be a perfect night. I had spent hours in the kitchen, carefully preparing every dish, hoping that maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. That tonight, I'd finally earned Vivian's approval. Ethan loved my cooking, and I had made his favorite meal, thinking that if I could get his mother to see how much I cared for him, things might change between us. I had always known Vivian didn't like me. She made it clear in the smallest ways, correcting the way I folded the laundry, commenting on how I wasn't raised in a proper home, and reminding Ethan how much she had sacrificed for him. But I kept hoping that one day, she'd stop seeing me as an outsider. The dining table was set perfectly, candles flickering, the aroma of freshly baked bread filling the air. I placed the last dish down just as Vivian walked in, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She didn't even look at me, just went straight to Ethan, pressing a kiss to his cheek like she always did. "Smells interesting," she murmured, her tone dripping with fake politeness. I swallowed hard and forced a smile. Ethan pulled out a chair for her, and we all sat down. For a while, everything was fine, or as fine as it could be. I tried to ignore the tension, focusing on keeping the conversation light. Then Vivian leaned in close to Ethan, whispered something in his ear. I saw it happen in real time. The way his face shifted, calmness melting into confusion, then twisting into pure rage. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened, and suddenly, he wasn't the man I knew anymore. He turned to me, his voice sharp. "Is it true?" My heart pounded. "What?" I barely got the word out before he shoved his chair back, the loud scrape making me jump. "Have you been lying to me?" His voice was louder now, filled with something dangerous. I didn't even get the chance to answer. Before I could process what was happening, his hand lashed out. The slap was so hard, so sudden, that my head snapped to the side. The sting spread across my cheek like fire, and I stumbled back, my back hitting the wall. Tears filled my eyes, my vision blurring. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The nausea that had been lurking all night suddenly overwhelmed me. My stomach clenched violently, and before I could stop it, I vomited right there in front of both of them. My purse, which had been on the chair beside me, tipped over in the process, spilling its contents onto the floor. And there it was, the pregnancy test. Positive. A silence, so thick it felt suffocating, filled the room. Ethan's face drained of all color. His eyes darted from the test to my tear-streaked face, to his own hand, the same hand he had just used to strike me. His lips parted, but no words came out. He took a step forward, reaching for me. I flinched before he could touch me. My whole body instinctively recoiled. Vivian sat frozen, her perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line, but even she couldn't mask the shock in her expression. "Oh my God," Ethan finally breathed, his voice trembling. "You're—" I touched my stinging cheek, my other hand protectively moving to my stomach. "Yes," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I'm pregnant." I had wanted this moment to be filled with joy, a surprise that would bring us closer. Instead, my secret had been revealed in the worst way possible. And now I had to decide, could I ever trust him again? The sound of the front door creaking open made all of us turn. Chloe stood there, her brows knitted in concern as she took in the scene. Ethan's clenched fists, my tear-streaked face, the mess on the floor, and the red mark on my cheek that was already swelling. "What the hell is going on?" Chloe's voice was sharp, her eyes locking onto me. I swallowed hard, my throat burning, my stomach still twisting with nausea. I couldn't speak. My body was frozen in place, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. Chloe didn't wait for an answer. She walked straight to me, gently cupping my face to examine the damage. I winced at her touch. Her eyes darkened. "She's coming with me," she said, her voice like steel. Ethan blinked, as if waking up from a trance. "Wait." Chloe turned to him, fire in her gaze. "You hit her, Ethan. She's pregnant and you hit her." Vivian scoffed, standing with a huff. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. Pregnant women are always emotional. You have no idea what she's put Ethan through." Chloe whirled around, cutting her off. "I don't care what your excuse is. I saw what I saw. She turned back to me. Let's go. Ethan took a step forward, guilt written all over his face. Grace, please, I flinched again, and that was enough. Chloe grabbed my purse, slung an arm around me, and led me toward the door. Let her go, Ethan, Vivian said smoothly. She'll come crawling back once she's done being hysterical. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she was wrong, but I had no words left. My heart felt shattered, my body exhausted. So I let Chloe guide me out of the house. As we stepped outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap, but it was nothing compared to what had already happened. Chloe's car was parked right in front. She opened the passenger door and helped me in. I barely registered anything as she drove. I felt numb. I wasn't sure how much time had passed when we pulled up to her apartment. She led me inside, settled me on the couch, and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. Drink this, she said, pressing a warm cup into my hands. I stared at it blankly. It's ginger tea, she said softly, for the nausea. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just running from Ethan. I was protecting someone else now. My baby. A fresh wave of emotion surged through me, and I finally broke down, sobs racking my body. Chloe sat beside me, rubbing slow circles on my back, saying nothing, just being there. I ignored my phone the rest of the night. It kept buzzing, lighting up with Ethan's name over and over. I didn't read the messages. I couldn't. The next morning, Chloe called my workplace, explaining I needed time off. She handled everything, my leave, picking up my things from home, making sure I had meals despite my morning sickness. Meanwhile, Ethan's texts kept coming. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Please come home. Then Vivian started. Stop being dramatic. You're tearing this family apart. A good wife would fix this instead of running away. I gripped my stomach, my heart pounding. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing for certain. I deserved better than this. Lying on the examination table, I felt my pulse racing as the ultrasound technician spread the cool gel across my stomach. Chloe sat beside me, squeezing my hand reassuringly. You ready to hear your baby's heartbeat? The technician asked with a warm smile. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. And then, there it was. A steady, rhythmic whoosh 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 filled the small room, and for the first time in days, the weight on my chest loosened. Tears welled up in my eyes as I stared at the flickering heartbeat on the screen. That's your baby, the technician said softly. A choked sob escaped my lips. Despite everything, despite the pain, the betrayal, this tiny life was growing inside me, strong and steady. Chloe handed me a tissue. That's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard, she whispered. I nodded, wiping my tears. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and hit the record button, capturing every second of that heartbeat. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, watching the recording replay. My hands trembled as I typed a short message and attached the audio file. Your child's heartbeat. I hesitated before pressing send. But deep down, I knew he needed to hear this. The response came almost instantly. Please, Grace. Can we talk? Alone. Without her. I knew exactly who he meant. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again, Vivian. I didn't even have to open the message to know what it said. The same manipulation, the same control. How dare you send that to him without discussing it with me first? I am his mother. I should be involved in these decisions. Something inside me snapped. I typed back quickly. You are not involved in decisions about my baby. Never have been. Never will be. And then, without another thought, I blocked her number. I turned back to my phone, Ethan's message still unread. I exhaled slowly before typing my response. Tomorrow at Carter's coffee shop. 2 p.m. If she shows up, I'm done. His reply was immediate. She won't. I swear. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but for the first time since that night, I was ready to find out. I arrived at Carter's coffee shop 15 minutes early, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. The scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air, bringing back memories of the first time Ethan and I met here. That day had been filled with laughter and nervous excitement. Today, All I felt was uncertainty. I picked a table near the door, an easy escape route if things went wrong. Chloe was parked across the street, just in case. At exactly 2 p.m., the bell above the door chimed. Ethan walked in alone. He looked terrible. His usually neat hair was unkempt, dark circles lined his eyes, and his clothes looked like they had been thrown on without much thought. He hesitated when he saw me, then cautiously approached. "Can I sit?" he asked, voice hoarse. I nodded. He sank into the chair across from me, his hands clasped together tightly. His eyes flickered to my stomach for a brief second before darting away, guilt shadowing his expression. "I kicked her out," he said abruptly. "Last night. She's gone." I stared at him, waiting. "She screamed, cried, said I was abandoning her," he admitted, rubbing a hand over his face. "She told me I was choosing wrong. But Grace, she's wrong. I should have chosen you from the start." His voice cracked, and I could see the weight of his guilt crushing him. I became her. That night, I turned into everything I hated, and I will never, never forgive myself for what I did to you. Tears welled in his eyes, but I didn't move. I didn't comfort him. I just waited. "I've started therapy. Twice a week." He reached for his phone and slid it across the table, showing me confirmation emails from his sessions. It was something, but it wasn't enough. "I have conditions," I said, my voice steady. "Non-negotiable ones." Ethan sat up straighter, nodding. "Anything. Vivian is out of our lives. Permanently. No visits. No updates. She will have no part in our child's life. Done." He didn't even hesitate. "You continue therapy. And we do couples counseling." "Already scheduled," he said, pulling another email up on his phone. "If you ever raise a hand to me again, I'm gone. No discussions, no second chances." I leaned forward, my voice cold. "And I will take full custody." Ethan swallowed hard. "I know." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. "This is my lawyer. I've already had her draft papers giving you full custody if I ever hurt you again. One incident. That's all it takes." I picked up the card, my fingers trembling. I stared at him, searching for signs of deception, for any hint that this was just another promise waiting to be broken. I didn't find it, but trust wasn't built in a single conversation. "I'm not coming home today," I said. "We start with counseling. We start slow." Ethan exhaled, his face filled with something that looked like both relief and sorrow. "Okay," he whispered. "Whatever it takes." I wasn't sure if I believed him yet, but for the sake of our child, I was willing to try, cautiously. The days after my meeting with Ethan felt like walking on a tightrope, one wrong step, and everything could come crashing down. True to his word, Ethan attended therapy twice a week and sent me proof each time. He never pressured me to come home, never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He was doing the work, but I still wasn't sure if I could trust it. Could he really change? While Ethan was proving himself, Vivian was proving something else. She wasn't going to let go so easily. The first time I saw her outside my school, I thought I was imagining things. I had just finished a lesson when I glanced out the window and spotted her silver Mercedes parked across the street. She sat there, sunglasses on, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching. I felt my stomach drop. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe she was just passing by. But then it happened again. And again. Each time, she never got out of the car. Just sat there, watching. One morning, as I walked to my car, I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned, and there she was, standing near the parking lot entrance, her arms crossed over her expensive coat. I froze. She took a step forward, a sickly sweet smile stretching across her lips. "We need to talk, dear." I gripped my bag tighter. "There's nothing to talk about." She let out a breathy laugh. "Oh, but there is. I have a right to know about my grandchild." I took a step back. "No, you don't." Her smile vanished. "Ethan is my son. And you," her voice lowered, laced with venom, "you are ruining his life." A lump formed in my throat, but I forced myself to stay firm. Leave me alone, Vivian. I turned to walk away, but she grabbed my arm. I yanked it free just as the school security guard stepped outside. Everything okay, Miss Carter? Vivian quickly stepped back, smoothing down her coat. Oh, of course. Just a friendly chat. I rushed to my car, locking the doors as soon as I got in. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. She's outside my school. Again. Ethan's reply came instantly. Ethan, I'm calling the police. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers arrived. I stayed inside my classroom, peeking through the window as they approached Vivian's car. At first, she played the part of the concerned mother-in-law, teary, soft-spoken, claiming she was simply worried about me. But when the officers told her to leave, the mask cracked. She's manipulating my son, she shouted, pointing at the school building. She's turning him against me. That baby is just a way to trap him. I closed my eyes, my stomach twisting in disgust. The officers remained unfazed. One of them scribbled something on a notepad before speaking firmly. Ma'am, if you return here again, you will be arrested for harassment. She stormed back to her car, slamming the door shut. That evening, Ethan and I sat in the lawyer's office together for the first time since the night everything fell apart. She's escalating, I said, rubbing my temples. She's not going to stop. Ethan looked down, his hands clenched into fists. I should have done this years ago. The lawyer slid a stack of papers toward us. The good news is, with school security footage and police reports, this restraining order is solid. She won't be able to come near you, the baby, or even Ethan. I signed without hesitation. Vivian Matthews was no longer a part of our lives. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Ethan showed up for every prenatal appointment. He never missed one. At first, I kept my distance, watching, waiting, wondering if this was just another attempt to earn back my trust. But he didn't push. He stayed quiet when I needed space, held my hand when I let him, and never let Vivian's name slip into our conversations. As my belly grew, so did my hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was serious about breaking free from her control. But Vivian wasn't done. She tried everything, calling distant relatives to ask about my due date, showing up at Ethan's work pretending to be concerned, even sending a fake apology letter that ended with a demand to be present at the birth. She never got the information she wanted. We had taken every precaution. The hospital was under Chloe's address, my registration was private, and every nurse and doctor on staff was warned about her. Ethan made sure of it. Nothing matters more than keeping you and the baby safe, he told me one night, his hand resting protectively on my stomach. For the first time in months, I believed him. Lily Grace arrives. Labor started at 2 a.m. The house was quiet, and for a moment, I thought the pain was just another restless night. But when the contractions hit harder, I knew it was time. Ethan followed our plan perfectly. He grabbed the hospital bag, called Chloe, double-checked the security cameras, and had us in the car within minutes. At the hospital, Chloe stayed close, watching over me while Ethan never left my side. He whispered reassurances, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and when the pain became unbearable, he simply held my hand, grounding me. 12 hours later, the room filled with the sound of a newborn cry. Our daughter, Lily Grace. Tears slipped down my face as the nurse placed her on my chest. She was perfect, tiny fingers, a button nose, a full head of dark hair. I glanced up at Ethan, expecting uncertainty, maybe even fear. But what I saw instead shattered every wall I had built. He was crying, silent, steady tears streaming down his face as he reached out to touch our daughter's little hand. She's beautiful, he whispered, his voice breaking. I swallowed past the lump in my throat, watching as he carefully cradled her for the first time. He looked at Lily like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. And maybe for the first time he understood this was what love was supposed to be. No control, no manipulation, no fear, just love. That night, as Lily slept in my arms, Ethan sat beside me, his fingers tracing small circles on her blanket. I will never let anyone hurt either of you, he said, his voice steady, sure. For the first time in a long time, I believed him. We had broken the cycle. The letter arrived 2 weeks after Lily was born. Chloe found it first, mixed in with the baby gifts on our front porch. The envelope was elegant, her handwriting flawless, as if it were some heartfelt message from a loving mother. But I knew better. I hesitated before opening it, but Ethan didn't. He tore it open and scanned the words, his jaw tightening with every line. Then, without a word, he walked to the kitchen, turned on the stove, and dropped the letter into the open flame. The paper curled and blackened, the words disappearing into ash. "She doesn't get to manipulate us anymore," he said, watching it burn. His voice was calm, steady, but I saw the finality in his eyes. Vivian had lost her hold on him. I should have known she wouldn't give up so easily. 2 days later, as I lay in my hospital bed, exhausted but peaceful, Chloe suddenly stiffened near the window. "Oh, hell no." I followed her gaze, and my blood ran cold. Vivian was outside. She stood at the hospital entrance, dressed impeccably, her hands clenched into fists. The look in her eyes sent a shiver down my spine. "She must have followed someone here," Chloe muttered, already pulling out her phone. Before she could call security, Ethan walked into the room, holding a cup of coffee. I barely had time to speak before he saw where we were looking. His whole body went rigid. Without a word, he turned and left the room. Chloe and I watched from the window as Ethan stormed outside. Security had already intercepted Vivian, but she was making a scene, her voice rising in that sickly sweet, manipulative way. "I just want to see my granddaughter. I have a right." "No, you don't." Ethan's voice cut through the chaos, cold and unyielding. Vivian blinked, her mouth parting slightly in shock. She had never heard that tone from him before. "Ethan, honey, she's my granddaughter." "She is not yours," he snapped. "You lost that right the moment you made me hurt the woman I love." She reeled back as if he had slapped her. "I didn't." "Yes, you did." His voice didn't waver. "Every lie, every manipulation, every whisper in my ear. You made me doubt her. You made me a monster. But no more." Her face twisted in rage. "She's turned you against me. You're my son." "No," Ethan said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm Lily's father now. That's the only title that matters to me." Vivian's face crumpled, but before she could say another word, the security guard stepped forward. "Mrs. Matthews, you need to leave. Now." She opened her mouth again, but Ethan had already turned his back on her. Inside, my phone buzzed. Restraining order extended. Permanently. I exhaled, pressing a gentle kiss to Lily's forehead. She would never know her grandmother's cruelty. The cycle was broken. For good. Life didn't magically fix itself overnight, but for the first time in a long time, we were free. Ethan and I moved forward cautiously, rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. Therapy became part of our routine, not just for our marriage, but for ourselves as individuals. There were still moments of doubt, still scars that would take time to heal, but the difference was, he never stopped proving himself. Boundaries remained firm. Vivian was gone from our lives, permanently. No calls, no letters, no lingering shadows from the past. Our home was finally ours, filled with love, not control. Lily grew up surrounded by safety, laughter, and warmth. She never knew the fear, the walking on eggshells, the manipulation. Instead, she knew bedtime stories, whispered lullabies, and parents who adored her more than anything in the world. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching Lily play in the yard, Ethan turned to me, his gaze steady. "I never imagined being this kind of man," he admitted. "But you showed me how." I squeezed his hand, my heart lighter than it had been in years. "We did it together," I said softly. And for the first time, I truly believed it.